Now we're in our third year of not being able to work here in Ecuador because of being under lockdown. Well, let me explain. When they closed the English academies and when they closed the academy where I was teaching, most of my colleagues started teaching online. And now they're in front of computers 9 hours a day, 8 hours of classes, a couple hours of paperwork, and it's just not that. Okay, so here's something that somebody said to me recently. If you can't find work in Ecuador, go back to the United States. And I'm like, it's the United States. It's because of the United States that Ecuador is in the quandary that it's in. It's because of United States policy that Ecuador closed the schools in the first place. Now, between 2013 and 2017, I did live in the United States, and I suffered a lot. I feel like in many ways, I lost my herd because I had grown used to the culture and the people in Ecuador, and there was a lot of things that even in my own culture that I couldn't accept and that struck me as wrong. And I thought I was going to be going back for a year, and I wound up staying for 4 years. I wanted to see my parents, and there wasn't a long-term solution to my paperwork in Ecuador either. But here's the strange thing. When I was there, I had friends from Ecuador that wanted to come and visit me. And they had visas to be able to come. The professional class, they have no problem going back and forth. But now I've been in Ecuador, but in a different province than where I was when I left in 2013. Where are those people? Where are those people who wanted to come and visit me in the United States? Now instead of a 6-hour flight, it's a 6-hour bus ride. Why don't they come? And I just hated it in the United States. It wasn't just living under the chemtrails. It was the reaction of the community, the smugness. And now we're in the Ukraine war, and I'd like to read an article. It's called The Great Acquiescence, Glory to Ukraine. And this appeared on Consortium News. And I've wondered if one of the reasons that Oliver Stone made the film Ukraine on Fire was to promote and to put Consortium News on the map. Americans don't merely acquiesce to the Imperium's wars, interventions, collective punishments, and assorted other deprivations. They actively embrace them. This is by Patrick Lawrence. It's a special to Consortium News. The other day, I ventured forth from my remote village to a lively market town called Great Barrington to shop for Easter lunch. Spring lamb, a decent bottle of Bourgogne. Easter is much marked in my household, one of the few feasts we allow ourselves, and it is a reminder this year of a truth that could scarcely be more pertinent to our shared circumstances. After all our small and large crucifixions, there is new life to come. After all our small and large crucifixions, there is life to come. A reference to the fact that right now we are in Easter. Great Barrington lies in the Berkshire Hills of western Massachusetts, a fashionable little burg, dense, as you can tell simply by walking around in it with righteous liberals. No place you remind yourself is perfect. There along the streets and avenues as I arrived were what I had anticipated. Ukrainian flags hanging off front porches, in shop windows, on flagpoles, just below the stars and stripes. Somebody has painted the bit of board displaying their house number in the blue and yellow we all now recognize. Father, forgive them, I thought, for they know not what blood-soaked horrors and hate-filled killers they enthusiastically endorse. This could be the people of Humboldt County as well, in California, where I lived the last 2 years of that sojourn in the United States. Do I miss it? Not a bit. He continues, not in my lifetime have Americans, purporting to be thoughtful, intelligent people, been so wide-eyed, so stupefied, as those who are pretending to lead them, and to inform them by seeking to bury them in ignorance. We now read that investigators are diligently documenting the catalog of inhumanity perpetrated by Russia's forces in Ukraine, the U.S. diplomat remarks. Nobody stops to think the investigators are all from nations that are acting against Russia. Where else should they come from? They shrug in Great Barrington. Nobody notes that the central question has been crudely removed from public discourse as these sham investigations get underway. The atrocities in Bucha, Mariupol, and elsewhere are beyond all dispute, but we must never ask who is responsible for them. I hear the good citizens of Great Barrington quaking with rage as the New York Times convicts the Russian leadership, as our president describes the Bucha tragedy as a Russian war crime not 2 hours after it came to light. U.S. funded but independent, priceless. And don't miss the slide into passive voice to avoid the truth, a recurrent Times trick I've grown very fond of, founded decades ago. Radio Free Europe was founded by a CAA front Alice Dulles cooked up in 1949, the National Committee for a Free Europe. They even had an invasion of Italy on the books if the Social Democrats won. It received agency funding until at least the 1970s, when the funding function was transferred elsewhere in the Washington bureaucracy for the sake of appearances. What Radio Free Europe is doing in Russia today is exactly what American liberals in paroxysms of horror accused Russians of doing during the 2016 election campaigns. But it is okay because we're doing it, they say in the charming bistro's Long Railroad Street. We must fight for democracy. Okay. Brute censorship? We are not reading in the corporate press, by contrast, that a new wave of brute censorship is now upon us, as social media such as Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube suspend, cancel, deplatform, whatever this radically anti-democratic business is called, dissenting writers and analysts who have taken the trouble to examine the facts on the ground in Ukraine, such as we have with professional disinterest. We must defend democracy at home. The good of Great Barrington exists, just as we must in Ukraine. Since the Russian Gate Fargo overcame liberal America in 2016, there has been much debate as to whether our McCarthy-esque circumstances are as bad as, or similar to, not as bad as how things got during the Cold War. This no longer seems to me the useful question. In various important ways, we have passed beyond even the worst of the Cold War's many dreadful features. Our better reference is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, wherein the English novelist pictured a society of incubated beings, programmed from birth, hooked on a happiness-inducing drug called soma, devoid of everything we now consider human, wholly incapable of connection, of responsibility, and indeed desiring neither. Infantile gratification is all that matters to those populating the world state Huxley imagined, such as anything matters. It's only the infantile gratification. We are not there yet, let's not exaggerate, but we ought to honor Huxley for his prescience, for we are heading in the direction of his unlivable world of mind-deprived children, watched over by a small chosen diabolic elite. I am not surprised that it is Ukraine that brings us to what I consider a collective psychological crisis. After 30 years of post-Cold War triumphalism, Washington has decided to use Ukraine and its people in a go-for-broke attempt, finally, to subvert Russia. Stepping back for a better look, this is a decisive event in the Imperium's confrontation with the 21st century, its grand roll of the dice, It's now or never moment. Broke it will be when all this is over, however far in the future that will prove. It's like the Irish hero who drowned swinging his sword in a rage against the incoming tide. We cannot win this one, and we are falling apart as the realization of our loss arrives subliminally among us. That's true. It's an unwinnable war for Ukraine. And Zelensky, for all his staunchness and apparent heroism, he's assuring that the Ukrainian people suffer more. Whoever wins this war in Ukraine, the non-West will win. Whoever wins the 21st century will win, bearing the most awful 20th at last. As for Americans, we have already lost. Our condition. What of our condition then? What has become of us? Why? And what shall we do about it? If I am correct about America's psychological crisis, its connection to the on-the-ground, in-our-faces crisis in Ukraine, it's not immediately apparent. Huxley wrote Brave New World in 1931 and published it a year later. Let us take that cue. Let's look back to consider the thoughts of a few people who, unlike most of us, took life seriously and so applied themselves to an understanding of their time. C. Fraser brought out The Age of Acquiescence in 2015. Fraser is among the best labor economists now active, an honorable man of the 1960s, and his subtitle tells us his line of inquiry, The Life and Death of American Resistance to Organized Wealth and Power. The life and death of American resistance to organized wealth and power. Why and when Fraser wanted to discover had American workers rolled over in surrender? What happened to all those fine New Dealers who, with good minds, fought hard for the kind of society they knew was possible? Labor isn't our topic, but his book has implications far beyond his specific interests. Fraser situates himself peering back into the past at a largely forgotten terrain of struggle, the New Deal years, battles waged against the anti-communist paranoia of the post-war decades, the anti-war movement of the 1960s and the early new 70s. The people animating these movements had memories and experience. They remembered what American society could be in its potential because they had lived for and acted on that potential. They knew another kind of America was possible. Most of us have forgotten all that. Younger people never shared that consciousness in the first place. Very few of us have any memory or experience of living under anything other than pervasive corporate domination and a government in its profound corruption that serves corporate capital and does as little as it can otherwise. And I cut my teeth in the September 11th Truth Movement. It was part of that whole subset of the anti-war movement that was trying to raise awareness about the September 11th. Most of our resistance was actually coming from the left because they thought it was a dangerous issue to touch. I was part of the anti-geoengineering movement, trying to raise awareness about the overhead spraying. Now I'm part of the movement raising awareness about how viruses don't exist. And there's people that say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether viruses are real. And the only thing I can say is look around you. Look how germ theory has been armed as a political tool. And it fits right in with what they're doing at Davos and the World Economic Forum. So these people of the 60s, the New Deal years, fought against anti-communist paranoia. They were part of the anti-war movement. They remembered what American society could be in its potential because they had lived for and acted on that potential. They knew another kind of America was possible. Now what do liberals stand for? Mass vaccination. It's a doctrinaire leftism that's devoid of any kind of moral virtue. Most of us have forgotten all that. Younger people never shared that consciousness in the first place. Very few of us have any memory or experience of living under anything other than a pervasive corporate control and government domination. It's profound corruption that serves corporate capital and does as little as it can otherwise. There's nothing to wage struggle for. In other words, our relations with those who hold power over us are not very different from the relations Huxley's children had with the sequestered elites who control their lives. This is the root of our prevalent assumptions. The work of any social or political campaign worth mounting now is rendered too imposing even to attempt. It is best to acquiesce to power, contenting ourselves, as we all live in Great Barrington or Humboldt County, with finding the best olive oil. Mass acquiescence largely leads us to an explanation of the preposterous support most Americans have for the criminal regime in Kyiv. And they don't know about the horrors of post-coup Ukraine. They don't even know about the coup most of the time. I suggest watching Oliver Stone's film, Ukraine on Fire, available on Rumble. But we're beyond Steve Fraser's age of acquiescence now. Americans don't merely acquiesce to all that the imperium imposes on the world, wars, interventions, collective punishments, assorted other deprivations. Americans actively embrace the conduct of empire. Please pass the kale chips. The sovereignty of good. Iris Murdoch, the minor English philosopher and second-rate novelist, published The Sovereignty of Good, a gathering of 3 essays on morality in 1970. I would be pleased to observe that nobody reads this ridiculous book anymore, and few take Murdoch's philosophical ruminations at all seriously. But Murdoch's argument in favor of a moral clarity that lies beyond dispute have a great deal to do with what we've become. Right and wrong and goodness are objective realities for Murdoch, and how too many of us now live. Human beings have no purpose so far as Murdoch was concerned. There are no ideals to strive for, no telos, to use the Greek term she preferred. People are innately selfish. Our destiny can be examined, but it cannot be justified or totally explained, as she put it. We are just here. Here are a few snippets to give a taste of Murdoch's prose and thinking. It is more than a verbal point to say that what should be aimed at is goodness, and not freedom or right action. Virtue signaling. The good has nothing to do with purpose. Indeed, it excludes the idea of purpose. I assume that human beings are naturally selfish and that human life has no external point or telos. The psyche is a historically determined individual looking after itself. The area of its vaunted freedom of choice is not usually very great. Quote, as Murdoch sees it, there is but one thing to do as we sit stranded on the universe's beach. We must recognize the inarguable reality of goodness and do our best to be good. This does not involve choices, as we have none to make. We are not, if I read Murdoch correctly, responsible for making judgments. Kindness, compassion, love, these are moral values, universal values. They're all we've got. Who decides what is good and worthy of kindness and how? Who decides what is right and wrong? Murdoch didn't address these essential questions because, being an empiricist, what is good, right, and wrong is simply there for us to see. Good is not representable and indefinable. Good is non-representable and indefinable, Murdoch writes, slithering, seems to me, out the side door. Here's my question. Would Iris Murdoch have made an excellent content monitor, a censor, that is to say, at YouTube, CEO at Twitter maybe? Readers may now expect where all this is leading, to the Maid Drag in Great Barrington. There you find people who are intent only on self-fulfillment and being good and kind and compassionate, while taking no responsibility for the events of their time because, after all, there is no purpose in life and we are just here. Being seen to be good and kind and compassionate is, of course, the essential thing. Joe Biden denounced the Bucha atrocities at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time on April 4th. At the very moment word came of them. At that moment, he could not possibly have had any knowledge of what had transpired. His reference here is to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, the truth of the matter, you saw what happened in Bucha. This warrants him. He's a war criminal. This guy is brutal. And what's happening in Bucha is outrageous, and everyone's seen it. Joe Biden. Pictures often require 1,000 words, and certainly they do in the Bucha case. But never mind that. The important thing is, we've all seen some images. It's a straight ahead case of right and wrong. Ukrainians suffer. Let us be kind to them. Russia have intervened in their country. Let us condemn them. Let us acquiesce. Let us be good. Okay, that's Patrick Lawrence writing for Consortium News. Okay, so the CIA is very good at going in with billions of dollars and creating these color revolutions. They're very good at making things go viral. They don't think about the effects that it's going to have on the people. And post-coup Ukraine has been a basket case, worse than Banana Republic dictatorship in terms of imprisoning journalists, stamping down on the press. I was talking with a guy, an American guy, an older gentleman, a few days ago, and he said that he was shocked that Russia would invade a democracy. Ukraine, post-coup Ukraine, hasn't been a democracy. It's a joke to call it a democracy, but how much of us really know what happened at the Maidan protests? Like the people in Great Barrington or Humboldt County. Can they even remember as far back as 2013 with any kind of clarity? Well, that's it for now. Please remember to go and watch my videos on AIDS and join the struggle to bring real information to the public.